All right, guys, welcome to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. I'm so excited to be chatting with Becky Hoschek, who has actually, you were like an early guest on my podcast back on
Yes.
episode 65. So one of the first few guests I did since I did so many solo episodes. And then I was recently on your podcast on episode
hmm
275. And I just love everything you do in your business. And I've loved getting to hang out with you in real life and then connect with you at times like
Yes.
this. So anyway, welcome Becky to the podcast. Yeah, so if you want to go ahead and tell everyone, who you are, what you do, and who you serve in your business.
Yeah, sure. So I help moms called to business as creatives and coaches simplify their businesses so that they are focused on the two things that my clients tend to care about the most, which is peace and profit. And I do this through very high touch, very personalized one-on-one coaching and consulting. And it really looks like a combination of mindset, coaching mixed with marketing and messaging strategy. And personally, I live in the Midwest. My husband and I have been married for 16 years now, and we are in the middle school era. And next year, our daughter will be a freshman in high school. And so we have a daughter who's an eighth grader and identical twin boys who are in sixth grade. And we also have a dog who I like to say is my favorite child. And her name is River. And yeah, so that's us. We live kind of out in the country on a property with 8 acres that we conveniently purchased right before COVID. And so that worked out really well for us to have all this space to
Wow.
ourselves. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. Oh, I also host a podcast, Beyond, and it is the podcast for moms called to business.
Yes. Yeah. And I love your podcast. And it's so fun because we started our podcast at like around the exact same time. I think you were a little ahead of
Yes.
me. And you
Yep.
also used to do more episodes a week, which is why, or maybe you still do. Do you do 2
Yes.
episodes a week?
I did for a little. I just had bonus
Yeah.
episodes like every so often where I would
Yeah.
double up, but I got tired of that
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Yes, yeah, it's fun being like on the same like podcast journey together. Yeah. And I
Yes.
always love hearing from moms who have a different, like in such a different season. So I know you're going to bring a lot to the moms listening to who are like, in the younger years because you've like been through that already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a question to get started, because I know you said your thing, and I've loved and I see this in your business, is like helping business owners focus on peace and profit. And I know a lot of us also start our business for freedom, right? Like we're doing the 9 to 5. We want the freedom of like flexible hours, more time with our family, more time to travel, more time to do other things. But then we find ourselves in hustle mode where we actually are working more than we may have been at that 9 to 5. So I guess the first question for you is like, where do you think we go wrong in the process that happens to so many business owners?
Yeah. What I tend to see is that somewhere around the mark of approaching or being beyond like the 6-figure mark in a business, there's this realization that sets in that's like, uh-oh, like it's kind of like what got me here isn't going to be sustainable and something has to change because I can't keep going like this. So like what it took to get to that initial 100K or close to it or whatever that looks like for you, it's almost with everyone that this sense of uh-oh sets in and they kind of are like, I need to rethink some things. And I think there's a few things that happen. The truth is, like, starting a business is really hard, but we make it more, I think we make it a lot harder for ourselves than it really has to be. I don't think we do this on purpose, but since we expect it to be hard, that kind of becomes our reality. And we're really good at overcomplicating things. And so we get into this cycle of doing more and more and more. And a lot of it isn't necessary. So it gets to the point where business isn't feeling like that reality of freedom like you described. It feels very different than the vision that you had. And I think that is kind of what happens. You have been going along, working really hard, doing all the things you think you're supposed to be doing to get momentum and get your business off the ground. But at a certain point, you realize this isn't really what you envisioned and really what you wanted. And you start to ask some questions.
Yeah. I think a lot of people listening can probably relate to that or have hit that at some point. And I've hit versions of that where it's like I have to be like, wait, is this actually what I'm trying to build? And you're right, it happens like once you hit certain revenue numbers, and then it's like, or even like complexity in your business, which I know we're going to get to, where
Yeah.
you have to reevaluate. Okay, so one thing that happens is that we overcomplicate things and then end up finding ourselves in hustle mode. What other areas do you feel like business owners go wrong with that?
Yeah. Another big one I see is that we don't define what enough looks like. And this is so, so important. A lot of times we just think we need more, right? More clients, more sales, more revenue. And we're just kind of throwing things at what you're just trying to make that happen to get that growth going upward. And what business starts to feel like when you run it that way is what I describe as running a marathon where there's no finish line because you've never
Oh,
identified where that finish line is. So you know if you've reached the goal or done the thing that you set out to do.
oh, yeah. And that's a bad feeling, a good way to explain it and not defining what enough is, which I know we'll get into more. Yeah, what other things? I know you said you had one more thing that that
Hmm.
causes us to find ourselves in hustle mode.
Yeah. A big one is that without realizing it, we start building the business that we think we're supposed to be building because of what we see someone else doing or what someone else recommended or told us we should do without making sure that that really makes sense for the business that we want to be building and the kind of lifestyle that we want to be living. And it's easy when you start to it's easy to get off course when you start veering that way, and it can take some time before you kind of start to recalibrate and think like, wait, how did I get here? What am I doing? Does this even make sense anymore?
Yeah. No, yeah. I feel like again, a lot of people are like hearing these are like, yes, I can relate. That's how I've ended up in hustle mode. Yes. So okay. I know you have three questions that can help us focus on peace and profits in our business, questions to ask, questions to really evaluate. And you already shared these with me. And I feel like these are ones worth like, we're gonna talk about them, hear you explain them, and then also like sit down and really answer these for yourself. But yeah, can you tell us what the
Hmm.
first question is and kind of explain it to us?
Yes. So, the first question to ask when you're wanting to optimize your business for peace and profit is what is my owner's intent? Now, if you've never heard this term before, I think of it as a less corporate version of a vision statement. And it really is answering the question, what's the end goal here? What is the purpose of my business? As I was sharing with you, I created a podcast all about this topic, identifying your owner's intent. And we can link that. It was just a couple of weeks ago. But it's very different building a business when your goal is to get on Shark Tank and get an offer from a shark than it is, say, if you're running my business, where my intent is really to stay small and maximize profit, working part time hours, doing work that I really, really love. So, defining that is so important. If you are trying to grow and scale, if you are trying to build a business that one day you want to sell, that is going to inform the decisions you make and what you do in your business so much. And if you don't have this defined, if you don't know what the point is or what the end goal is, then it's really hard to stay focused on things that are going to make the most sense to meet those goals.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally see that. And like, so with that, like, let's say someone is like, okay, like maybe one day they really know what their owner's intent is and they like have the vision for what they want their business to be, but there's so many distractions of like other people
Mhm.
telling you this is the kind of business you should try to build or like, oh, here's this cool marketing idea that you never thought of and like look at this person, that person's business. Do you have any advice for like how you overcome kind of like the squirrel mindset, honestly, of like all the different ideas being thrown at you?
Yeah. I think when you do have this defined for yourself, it becomes an automatic filter that you can ask those kind of questions. I think it's a lot easier to get distracted and chase the shiny objects when you haven't defined this because
Yeah.
you're always almost looking for the next thing that's going to move the needle forward, or the next idea that you should try. And I think this is so common with creatives, especially because we do have a lot of ideas, and it's tempting to pursue the new thing that looks more fun and more interesting than what we've been working on. But when you have that intent to kind of guide you, it's a lot easier to ask, like, does this make sense? Yes, someone over here may be doing this, but are they even building the same kind of business as I am? And does this make sense for what I'm creating and the goals that I have?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great question with that. And yeah, making sure that who you're learning from is like aligned with what your goals are for your business. Okay, with the owner's intent, another kind of question is I even think about like how I could define that in my own business. Do you feel like that's like one sentence or like a paragraph? And like how do we put it somewhere that we like see it and think about it?
Mm-hmm. You can, I think it can look different. You may have, one business may have, maybe the goal is purely financial, and like the goal of this business is to produce X amount of profit each year. For me, kind of how I define mine has a couple of points to it. There is um, the maximizing of profit is the first goal.
Yeah.
So I run a very lean business, keep expenses as low as I can. Now I do have the ability to do a lot of the creative and a lot of the stuff in my business, so I don't require a lot of expenses. But that's a piece of it. For me, it's wanting to work part-time is another big piece, and doing work that I really enjoy. I think you and I even had a conversation at one point that I don't have a goal to grow a team. Like, that's just not
Yeah.
a part of my vision for where the business is going. And that's okay. Like, whether or not there's nothing wrong with that business model by any means, or neither is scaling with digital products or whatever that looks like for you. For me, I love working with clients one-on-one, and it took me some time to realize I don't know that I ever want to grow beyond that. Like, I love it so much. And so it's important for me to know that, because it's going to inform the decisions I make moving forward. So I think you can really make it concise into one sentence, but also know if it has a couple of parts to it, like mine does, it's not just financial. It's about the quality of work and the kind of stuff that I'm doing in my days, and also how much. Like, it makes no sense. There's only a certain point that I'm going to be able to grow serving people one-on-one if I'm only willing to work 20 hours a week, right? So like, that's going to have a boundary that I can't, unless I were to scale through price. But those are just important things to know.
Yeah. And that is so like helpful in defining so that you do know like what ideas to say no to and what ideas to say yes
Mm-hmm.
to. And I think everyone here needs to hear what Becky just said of like more people need to know that you don't have to scale your business with digital products or with a team. And if you want to, that's great.
Yes.
But I feel like there is such a in the online business world, such a like, oh, service business, that's bad. You should go get away from that. You need to do digital products. That's where all the money is or whatever. And that's not always necessarily true. And digital products are not for everyone. Just
Yeah.
like maybe working with one-on-one for long term is not for everyone. But I feel
Yeah.
that a lot as someone who like teaches people doing both of like, it doesn't have to be all digital
Yeah.
products as like the solution to
Yes.
everything.
100%. And
Yeah.
um, for those listening who are one-on-one service providers, whether you're an educator or a designer or a photographer or whatever that looks like, I think it's really important when you start to consider what growth would look like, or moving beyond one-on-one work. It was just really encouraging to me one day when I realized working with someone one-on-one is never going out of, that's never going to lose its value. Everyone values personal, private, one-on-one attention. And because of that, I think there's even a greater demand, because so many businesses are, I know so many coaches and so many even business educators, and in different in different niches, really. Like, it's like they try to get away from one-on-one as quickly as they can. And I think it's making it better for businesses like mine who have been able to just build deeper and deeper relationships with my clients because I don't work with a ton of people.
Yeah. That's such a good point that it creates the demand for it because people are running to let me make digital products as quickly as possible as if that's like the only solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love that question. Is there anything else you want to add on the owner's intent question?
I don't think so. I guess the only other thing I would say is you have to be really honest here. Um, it's so when we start to dive into like mindset work, one of the topics that I work with so much with clients is what success looks like for you. And I don't think we realize how informed that becomes by what we see other people doing. And when you want to build a business that truly is fulfilling what is right for you, for your life, for your family, for your business, it will look like doing things differently. And that's really uncomfortable because we kind of get to a place where we think, well, she's doing this that's what success is. Or over here, like he's doing this, like I want to do that. Um, it's kind of interesting because a lot of us want to do things differently. Like I think we know like deep down like this isn't right. Like I don't like how this is going. I want to do something different. And it's like this internal conflict between the part of human nature that wants to belong and be similar to what everyone else is doing, and that part of us though that really feels called to do something different. And navigating that can be really hard, especially when you're not even sure what's at play, and like that's a conflict that's happening within you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Um, yeah, it is such a I would say too, like you want to revisit it of just
Mhm.
making sure making sure you're keeping whatever your owner's intent is front of mind versus it because it
Yeah.
is so easy if you stop thinking about that and then all of a sudden you have all these other distractions of other people with well-intended people giving you business ideas and then it's like it doesn't fit in with what your goals are. I know
Yes.
I have to do that personally of like making sure I'm paying attention to that. Okay, that's awesome. What is the second question we can ask ourselves?
Yeah. This is really getting clear on why you are doing what you're doing. Not so much as it connects to your owner's intent, but are you building the business that you just think you're supposed to be doing? Are you following someone else's method or formula or steps? Is it the business you think you're supposed to be building, or is it really the business that you feel called to create? And I think that a lot of us too, we're so busy at the beginning and we're just trying to get through the day, doing all the things. Sometimes we're too busy to even notice that what we're doing is for a reason that's maybe not the best. Like a lot of us are building businesses that we just think are what we're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to look like. So for this one, I would say you really have to intentionally pause and think like, what am I doing? And do I like my reasons? Or am I just following what, again, like what I think I'm supposed to or should do? And that happens so much.
Yeah. And would you suggest people journal about that question or or just go on a walk and think about what would be your best method for really getting to the bottom of it?
Yeah, I think it does require some introspection, some introspective time, some really thinking. If thinking while you're walking works well for you, or while you're working out or in the shower or whatever that looks like, I think it is really just um, asking what your reasons are, and do you like them, or does this just feel like what you're supposed to be doing? And I think we've probably all been in a season where we haven't really checked in to see if the decisions we're making are aligned with long term where we're going. But it's like, oh, this is what they said the next thing to do is. And I know I have an experience with that I'm going to share in a bit. But um, yeah, I think some of us are um, processors where we just like to like have a conversation with ourselves in our mind and think through this. If you're someone who likes to write, I think that can be really helpful too. If you're someone who like likes to talk things out, I think this is one reason like coaching works so well for some people. But
Yeah.
even like a spouse or a friend, just like, hey, could you just like talk me through this, or like listen to me process this out loud?
Yeah. Oh, those are great. Yeah, everyone needs different ways. I know for me, like as you're talking, I'm like, I'm gonna like get out my journal and like write about these because that would be my
Yes.
version of this.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that though. Like you gotta think about it though. And with like the question of, am I building the business I'm supposed to be like that I'm supposed to be like called to, or that I think I'm supposed to be, or that I feel actually called to. I think
Hmm.
something to listeners might need to hear with that is like sometimes we end up building a business or an offer that you're like, whoa, 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 this was actually not what I was supposed to be doing, but you thought it was. So I would just add having
Yes.
compassion on yourself if that's what happens. Cause I know I've shared about this on the podcast before, but I had a membership.
Yes.
Now it was like two years ago, but I, started it. I felt like it really was the right thing. It wasn't like um, yeah, I built it with good intention, and it ended up not being the thing that my business was actually like called to do next. And so I had to have some like, okay, Elizabeth, like it's okay that you did this like wrong, so to speak, but like, how do you want to change it now? A lot of people might kind of have some things where they're kind of in that boat too.
Yeah, and I guess to build on that too, I guess the opposite can happen. There can be times, you can literally just change your mind sometimes. My whole intention when I decided to pivot into coaching was that I wanted to create a membership. And that was my whole like intent. And as I started learning about just the pros and cons and just nuances of different business models, it became very clear to me that that is not the direction that I wanted to go. And, but I didn't know it yet. So I think you do have to give yourself some grace because you learn as you go and you figure out a lot of things as you go. So even when you have the best laid plan, there are times where you're just going to learn things that lead you to change your mind, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, everyone can you can grow and evaluate. Business is such a journey. I love that.
Yes.
Okay, I really love this third question. Can you walk us through that last one?
Yes. The third question is, where does business feel complicated? And most likely, if you just ask yourself this, your mind is going to go somewhere. Um, it's going to, and usually it's where things feel the most difficult, things feel the most stressful or overwhelming. But ask, where does business feel complicated? It can look very different for each one of us, but one way I like to think about it is, where does it feel like there may be too much of something? Overworking, overthinking, overspending, overcommitting,
Mm,
overextending yourself in your commitments. um, Asking that question, where do you feel like there's too much of something, can be a really good indication to point you more toward where that problem area might be.
yeah. And it's so yes, and I feel like I can even think of things in my business where I'm like that was my answer. Like where things are feeling complicated, and then it does point you to like maybe setting better goals, changing things, all of that good stuff. For someone listening though, who's like, oh my gosh, I have built a big complicated business that's stressful. What would you suggest they do to like start simplifying it more?
Yeah. Well, I think that asking these questions are a really good start to get you just the clarity that you need to move forward in taking a new direction. Once you get that clarity and kind of realize like, maybe this, maybe there's opportunity here to change some things. um, then you really want to get clear on what's working well and what isn't. So kind of building on that question of, where do things feel complicated? On the flip side of that, you can ask yourself like, where do I feel like I'm my best? Like what has
Mm,
where do I feel like the best season of my business has been? Like when it was doing the best, what was it about? Like what was going on at that time? What was I doing that made it feel so aligned with how I want to be working or how I want to be living? Also, when you think about the different roles and the different types of work that you do within your business, asking yourself, like, what are the parts that are your favorite, that you look forward to doing when you wake up each morning, and what are the parts that you don't? Not that you have to be a business owner who only does the fun things by any means, but I think it sheds a lot of light on where there's opportunity to focus your time, or if you do decide that you want to have some help and hire someone, where are those areas that would make the most sense to kind of hand off to someone else first?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. And also with those 3 questions, what would you say how we can use them to, I know as we're listening, we're like midway through the year, but maybe even as we're like evaluating goals, how could we use those questions to end up like making them really actionable and setting better goals for our businesses?
Yeah. So I think the first two questions, so identifying your owner's intent, and questioning if you're building the business that you think you're supposed to be building or actually want to be building and feel called to build. Those two, I think they provide a lot of clarity in terms of purpose and direction. And then when we're setting goals and making decisions, everything you do can be filtered from the lens of the clarity that you found between those two questions. And then with the third one, I think where your business feels complicated, it just really shines a light on where some things might need your attention, or where things have gotten where there's an opportunity to simplify.
Yeah, and that can be where you end up setting some goals, or I loved your like alternative version of that question, even of like what season of business or thing in your business makes you feel like more light and like it's going well, and where are you your best? Because that
Mhm.
also is like can make you be like, let's do more of that. Yeah,
Yes.
those questions are
Yes, and the
awesome.
truth is that the way our brains are wired, we're always going to default for looking at what's going wrong. And so if we can give ourselves equal airtime of looking at what is working well, I think that that can help um, inform a lot of your decisions as well. But if you're so busy that it just feels like you're constantly putting out fires and trying to make it through the day, it's you aren't thinking like, oh yeah, also at the end of the day today, I'm going to think about what's working well, right? We don't just naturally do that, but it is really important.
Yes. And I've said that before on this podcast, but like that's why I think as business owners, you need time in your schedule where you don't have anything to do except for think about stuff like this. And so
Yeah.
often it's like between motherhood and marriage and your business, especially if you aren't working like 40 hours a week, it's like you're never making time for like just thinking about your business. So it's like
Yes.
yeah, what I know in my business has been at its best, which I feel like right now I'm in a place where right now I'm like business feeling really good. It's like I'm
Hmm.
doing this of like setting aside time to like actually think about and evaluate. And it doesn't always feel productive compared to like what you could be doing of like recording a podcast or working with a client or whatever it is, but it's really
Yeah.
important.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Another kind of thing that I've heard you talk about is that there are 2 key things to creating a simplified life and business. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So, how I like to describe this is that these two pieces have everything to do with the role of story. The first one is the stories we tell ourselves through our mindset. And the second is the stories we tell everyone else through our messaging. So, those, our audience, those dream clients that we want to work with. And the two are actually very connected. And I don't think it's something that we give a lot of thought to. In fact, it's taken me a few years of working with clients to realize why this is so important, and also that my ability to help people with both pieces is not something that's very common. And that has really come to the surface over the last couple of years too. Um, what I like to say is that the stories you tell yourself about you, about your business, about yourself, about what is possible, they stories don't only inform your level of confidence, but also how you show up as the leader of your business and the server of your clients. Um,
Yeah.
it is often uh, mindset, I would say, is often the most overlooked and underutilized strategy that we have as entrepreneurs because it's kind of tough to do on your own. There are pieces of mindset work that you can absolutely do, journaling, doing different, using different tools. But the truth is that it's really hard to see what we can't see for ourselves. And a lot of times we do need the perspective of someone else to shine a light on those things if we really want to get to the root of what's going on. So often we just need someone else to show us, to shine a light on those stories, because it's not, if we can't see them, we can't do anything about them. So there's the stories that you tell yourself. And then these stories that you tell yourself have everything to do with the stories that you tell your audience and your ideal clients through your messaging. I think why I love the work that I do so much is because marketing and sales have everything to do with understanding psychology and human behavior and what it is to be human, what matters to us, what we care about. And it's become so clear to me working with clients over the last years that the more you understand you by doing this work, by taking the time and prioritizing your own mindset work, and really, like, nobody seeks out, I've never had a client come to me saying, "Can you please help me work on my relationship with myself?" But that is actually a huge piece of what we ended up doing. But the more you understand yourself, the more you're better able to understand and relate to other humans, which is a super valuable skill set as an entrepreneur. When you understand why something feels hard or a certain pain point or what life on the other side of solving that problem looks like and why it's so valuable. These are all things that you can learn through your own personal work, but translate out into how you communicate to your people and your audience. And it's a complete game changer because this is not something that a lot of business owners invest in. And the ability to make your people feel seen and heard and understood is not something that you can fully do or do well without first having done that work personally.
That's a word. Yeah, you can't do that work without doing it personally. Yeah, I love that and totally agree. And it is like, I know you mentioned like confidence and how we show up as a leader and how we show up for our clients, but it is like, yeah, when we are like operating in a like low place of like self-doubt and like nothing's working, it really does affect how you market yourself, even when you're doing like all the right things of like the right funnel or you're posting the right reel
Yes.
trend. And it's like, it doesn't, we show up differently when we're in that like different headspace. That's
Yeah. And
really good.
people, again, like, just as human beings, like, we can pick up on what that energy is, even if we can't articulate that or understand. If you're on a sales call with someone and you can just tell something's off, you just know, and that it just doesn't feel right. Right. So I think that
Yeah.
is a big piece. Like, that is the energy we bring. I think that's the best word to use for it. Um, has everything to do with how we're taking care of our thoughts and beliefs about what we're doing, and our value is huge. Like, do we really believe? When it comes to sales, I like to say, you're never going to sell anyone anything if you're not sold first. And I think other people can tell very quickly if you're sold on the value of what you offer.
Oh, yes. I totally agree with that. Yeah, you can't sell something that you don't like actually believe is worth the value, especially I know I work with a lot of designers who it's like you may like in book.designer where it's like they may not like believe that the price is worth it. That's like you're saying, it makes you show up differently on a discovery
Yep.
call or sales call if you don't really believe in it. What are some ways though that you would say too that we could like work on those stories we tell ourselves and like improve them so that then we can also, live a better life, but then also show up differently in the way we like talk to our audience?
Yeah. So the main thing, the most important step is creating awareness around them. And I think that there is a couple of ways to do this. On our own, we can, I would say, journaling, or, just kind of doing a inventory of what's on your mind, what you've been thinking about, can be really helpful in shining a light on some of those stories. And, it's just when you see on a piece of paper that you've written down, I'm a horrible mom, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm never going to figure this out, or this is too hard. Like when you start to see those in black and white because you've written them down on paper, you start to connect the dots of like, oh, yeah, so it's no wonder I feel so terrible, or it's, no surprise that I want to quit and like run away from this whole thing because you're seeing the thoughts. I think the next level of it is working with someone, because I know for me personally, just through my own personal work and working with so many clients, is that a lot of the aha moments, those big realizations that change things, like change the trajectory of what you're doing, or are just such an eye-opening moment that you are like, oh, this was like so invaluable, often come when someone else is listening to us and is picking up on the things that we're not seeing for ourselves. So I can't recommend that enough. If you've never worked with someone one-on-one, I find in the one-on-one space that people feel safer and more comfortable sharing those things than, like in a group container. I think mindset is just something that's can be a little more personal when you've never really like talked to these things that you're afraid of, or shared with anyone before. The one-on-one environment can feel safer to some people, but I would definitely consider trying that out and working with someone, because it can be pretty amazing that things like we're just so in our thoughts, in our heads, living our lives, doing our thing. Other people may be able to pick up on some things like pretty quickly, that will be game changers for you.
Yeah, having that feedback like outside of yourself. And I love what you said too about journaling it and seeing the thoughts. I know
Mm-hmm.
as we're recording this, it'll be a bit later when people hear it, but I'm 37 weeks pregnant, gearing up for birth. And that's been something, both processing fears around birth, and also just like processing with people, but also journaling. And it is like when you write down whatever the thing is and then try to like, be like, okay, what's like really true about this? It's so impactful versus
Yes.
letting it just spin in your head where you're not actually like putting it somewhere that can be like truly acknowledged. So yes, I agree with everything you just
Yes.
said.
Yeah, and
Um,
an exercise that can be really helpful, actually, that can complement your journaling, is getting to the point where you feel comfortable enough, um, seeing what you've written, but then letting yourself separate the facts from the stories that you're telling. Like what is, like you kind of just touched on, what is true here and what is just something that my brain has created, has constructed to make sense of this experience and what's happening, but it is not actually very helpful to me at all. It may be because it's not true. It may just be because it's not helpful and it makes me feel terrible to think about. I think that when you start to be able to discern the difference between what's really true and what isn't, um, we're all believing so many lies. Um, and, if those go unchecked, like how can we ever do anything about it? So creating that awareness is everything if we want to make some changes and be able to rewrite the lies or overwrite the lies with a new story that serves us so much better.
yes, yes, I totally agree. You're giving me a lot of inspiration in this episode too for things to do.
Good.
Um, okay, let's talk. I have some rapid fire questions for you that I know you've got
Yes.
great answers to, and then I want to talk about how people can work with you and follow along with you and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Okay, the first one though, what's an unpopular opinion you have about mindset in the entrepreneurial, like online business space?
Yeah. I think that it would be that growth equals success. And I think we live in a world where the messaging in the business world is that you have to chase growth, you have to get bigger, you have to do more, you have to do more year after year in order to be successful. Um, that is just a thought. That is just a belief. We don't realize that. A lot of us just think like I'm chasing that because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And that would be a realization I've had recently. Like the hill I'm willing to stand on is, you know, I don't believe that growth equals success. It may be part of it for you. It may not be. Um, I have clients who have businesses where, yep, like they are growing this year. They are doing more and they have maybe a goal to make more profit this year. I also have clients who are super excited to have a year that just repeats what they did last year because they love where they're at. They have plenty of time. They are making enough because they've defined what that looks like. There's no belief that it needs to be more than it was last year to make it mean more. And they, feel very good about that. So I think that would be it, like debunking this belief that growth equals success.
Oh, I'm like, yes, amen to that. I totally agree with you. Yeah, the growth is not the equal success. And like, I feel like I talk a lot about building like a life focused business, which is what we're really getting
Yep.
into of like, when we ask like, is this the business I actually want versus one I feel like people are like telling me I need. But when
Yep.
you're building like a life focused business, life is always changing. You enter different seasons where it might be like, yeah, growing the revenue and profits is not a goal this year, but this thing in my personal life is, in my business and personal life,
Yes.
even if we want to say like, let's balance and separate them, they're not as separate as you might would wish as a business owner. So it's like what's happening in your personal life is greatly going to affect how things are happening in your business. We have to think about those together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I
I
think
love that.
too, that messaging can lead us to feel like if we have a year, let's say, where we see numbers that are lower than last year, I think we automatically think that we've failed because we were supposed to grow, we were supposed to get bigger. And I think it's really interesting. Last year, I actually had a goal to, kind of not really downsize, but like my goals were smaller because I needed capacity to give attention to some other things that were going on in my life. And on paper, to someone else, that may look like, oh, that wasn't a very good year. That was the best thing that I could have done for myself. And the numbers on the financials for the year are just a piece of that because I would describe the year as very successful.
Yes. Yeah, it's like it's not all just defined by like number stuff for sure. And I feel some of that this year because as I am in a year like with a newborn, it is like my goals.
Hmm.
Actually, I literally have revenue lower goals than I did the year before. So it is like, and I don't know
Yeah.
if maybe they'll do better than that, but it is like I am like that's not my biggest like life focus this year by any means. Yeah, so that's
Yes.
just such a good thing that we need to be reminded of. Okay,
Yes.
I love this question, but do you have a favorite failure? So basically, like a failure in your business, when we define failure lightly there, but like something that set you up for success later on or taught you something.
Yes. Yeah. So several years ago, I launched a group program because I believed that's what the next thing I was supposed to do. Um, where I was at in my business, I just things I was listening to, things I was learning. It just seemed to make sense. So I invested in working with someone, significantly invested in someone whose expertise was in this area, growing a group program. And I realized pretty quickly that this direction didn't really make sense for me, my goals, or the business I was building. I did not want to be spending all my time creating curriculum and doing a lot of other back end things that like was keeping me from working personally with clients. And it was a costly lesson financially. I offered that program once or twice, and then not again. But on the flip side, what I learned that year has impacted so much of what I do now and played such a role of something I needed to learn in order to kind of unpack my own, I don't know if you would call it like not necessarily like intellectual property, but my own way of doing things that is different. And how then can I articulate that in a way that I can teach that? So much of that became what is now simplified, the 6-month coaching and consulting intensive that I have for coaches and creatives. And I don't think I would have arrived there if I hadn't had that experience of seeing how complicated things get when you start to go in the wrong direction, and only wrong because it does not make sense for where, who you are and how you want to be working and how you want to be growing.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like, yeah, such a good way to put that too, of like, ask yourself, how can the failure like impact your business positively in another way, even though that thing didn't work out. I still remember sitting with you at Frothy Monkey and us talking
Yes.
about that whole thing of like that decision and everything going on there. And
Yes.
it is like, it's so great to see how it has led you to like something that is like the right fit for you. So that makes me really happy.
I do think that anytime you can think, whenever I see something doesn't work out as I think it's going to, or if things just take a different direction than I was expecting, I really do like to ask, like, okay, what is the lesson here? Because that was a 5-figure lesson. And so I wanted to get some value out of that, right? Like, what is the lesson here? And there were so many takeaways. I mean, I could probably talk for an hour about the different lessons I learned about from that experience alone, just in terms of clarity in what you're selling and integrity and so many things that were just so many takeaways from that. But I am grateful for it because I think it led me to ask myself some questions as an entrepreneur that I now know are so important to ask my clients. And I would never have known that if it wasn't for that experience.
Mm, yeah. What's the lesson? That's a good question we can learn through all that kind of stuff. And it's business owners, it's like, that's something we have to remember. It's like you're always in like school in a sense. There's always things to learn, to grow and evolve in your business. So it's like everything has learning moments in it, in our experiences, and even in like listening to stuff like this podcast where you're learning things. So
Yes.
yeah, I love
I
that.
know I always
Okay.
like to say business is a lot like parenting, in that as soon as you think you have it all figured out, everything changes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like that's been like, yeah, especially like, I guess it happens like forever, but I feel like I felt that so much going from like 0 to 2.5 years old with Colin, of just like, it's everything,
Yes.
even down to sleep. It's like you figure out sleep and then it's like you got to change up nap schedule or whatever else it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Yes, that's so true. Okay. What's your favorite thing about being a mindset coach and like running the business you run?
Yeah, I always like to say that my job is to help you grow your business, but my mission, I think that like what it is deeper that I'm called to, is to help you grow as a person. And there's something so fascinating to me. I mean, from even like from a faith perspective of how I see God working in our lives through motherhood and business. I think that the way it builds character and shapes and refines us is something that can only be, in some ways, accomplished through the roles of being a mom and being a business owner. And this work just creates such a ripple effect. I love seeing how something that I've worked on with a client, or something, if you become more confident, a more confident decision maker as an entrepreneur, seeing that ripples out into how you parent, and how, how that does that impact your marriage, what you think about yourself. It impacts everything, every part of your life. So I think that's probably the coolest part. I have fun. I love business. I love marketing. I love psychology. I love mindset. But the coolest part, like my favorite part, is seeing how not only businesses grow, but people do.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And you're so good at all that. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah. So let's close with telling everyone about how they can work with you in your program Simplified, and then also about how they can listen to Beyond podcasts.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Simplified, again, is a 6-month, it starts, at least it's a 6-month container, a one-on-one, high touch, mindset and messaging program where you literally get um, one-on-one mindset calls. You get marketing and messaging strategy. You can submit your marketing assets to me for critiques and feedback. I'm very much like a partner with you. I like to say that working with me in this program, and I say program, it's it's still a one-on-one experience. But working with me, I like to say, is like having a business therapist, a creative director, a marketing strategist, a copywriter, and a personal trainer for your brain all in one, because it kind of checks all of the boxes. And it's not necessarily limited to 6 months. Like, the clients inside Simplified always have first dibs on any openings, so you could always continue beyond that. But it's so much fun. The process, who I would say it is for is if you are at the point where you're seeing some success in your business financially, you're seeing some results, you have clients, you have a service that sells. I don't work with product-based businesses because I don't know anything about running a physical product business. I know a lot about building a creative business as a designer or a writer or an online service provider, coaches, educators, consultants. But if you feel like you're at the point where you're starting to feel like this is getting complicated and you don't see it being sustainable unless some changes are made, I would encourage you to apply for Simplified. It is such a personal growth journey as well as business. It combines the two things that I really do believe are the most important to creating a peaceful and profitable business as a mom, which is the stories you tell yourself and the stories you tell your people. And how can we leverage that to really make the most of the time that you're working in your business. So Simplified is application based. You can apply at beckyhoschek.com/simplified. It takes about 7 minutes to complete the application. If I receive that and find that I feel confident that you're a good fit and I could help you get where you're wanting to go through Simplified, then I invite you to a one-on-one call where we just chat, get all of your questions answered so that you can make the best decision for you. That's what that looks like. And then beyond the podcast for moms called to business, it is on Apple, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Like episode 288, I think, is what I'm working on this week. So
awesome.
I haven't run out of ideas yet.
Yes, I know. So you're about to hit 300. You may have hit 300 by the time this airs, which is so exciting.
Yeah, we may.
Yes, but you guys go check out Becky's program Simplified. And then there is a spot to put like where you heard about it. So if you do apply, put this podcast or my name or something there so Becky knows where you came from.
Definitely.
Perfect. And go listen to her podcast too. Seriously, your podcast is awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Becky, for being here. I love this conversation. I know I got a lot of learning from you, and I'm sure listeners did as well.
I'm so glad.